My daughter found a tick on her this morning. We use special tick tweezers to pull it off. We'll keep an eye on it to see if she needs to go to the doctor and get some medicine. Fingers crossed. I tell this because we're all much more familiar with how to handle tick bites now. They and Lyme disease have become a part of our regular outdoor life. But there's still more to know, and science is always learning. And it's not just about Lyme. There are 2 other tick diseases to watch out for. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from the St. Lawrence County Community Development Program, now accepting applications for the Head Start program to prepare children ages 3 to 5 for school. Online at slccdp.org/head-start.
Hey, I'm David Summerstein. It's Tuesday, June 11th. First up, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo testified today before a House subcommittee investigating the state's COVID-19 response. In a video message before the hearing, Cuomo denied any wrongdoing in the scandal that emerged over nursing homes accepting COVID-positive patients.
Republicans claim nursing homes were forced to take COVID-positive people by New York's advisory, and many believed it. Their claim was a factual and legal impossibility.
Cuomo said the state followed federal guidelines set by Medicare and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Cuomo became a national figure early in the pandemic with his signature daily briefings, but he resigned as governor in August 2021 under pressure from a wave of sexual assault and harassment allegations against him. Cuomo has recently floated interest in running for public office again. The Trump campaign has stepped up its search for a vice presidential nominee, and reports last week revealed that North Country Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has made the shortlist of potential candidates. Anna Williams-Bergen reports.
North Country Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is officially on the shortlist to become former President Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate. According to Politico, the Trump campaign has sought vetting records for 8 Republican politicians, including Stefanik. She's the only woman in the group. Stefanik is the 3rd highest-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives. She has increasingly taken a national spotlight for her unwavering support of former President Trump. If chosen as Trump's running mate, Stefanik would need to leave New York's 21st congressional district race, where she's currently seeking re-election this fall. She faces Democrat Paula Collins.
A new state health order will allow doulas to better support pregnant and postpartum people. Speaking in Brooklyn yesterday, Governor Kathy Hochul said the order, which was secured in this year's state budget, removes a requirement that families be medically recommended for doula services to get covered by Medicaid.
Doula services, which have really stepped up into the forefront as a service that is indispensable for women to make sure that they have an advocate when they go to their appointments and ultimately child. There's someone who understands, it's culturally competent, there's people who understand the stresses, and someone who's been through it themselves often.
Hochul says the services will help the state address high maternal mortality rates among racial and ethnic minorities. The order issued yesterday allows doulas to provide physical, emotional, educational, and non-medical support before and during birth and a year afterward. Ticks have become an expected, if unwelcome, part of North Country summers over the last 20 years. And that means tick-borne diseases are more prevalent too. Amy Feiereisel has more on the current tick landscape and why people need to be aware of more than just a red bullseye.
Many listeners who grew up in the North Country will remember childhoods that were tick-free.
Because I remember as a kid, I played in cow pastures and ran through fields, and you never worried about a tick. You worried about poison ivy, poison oak.
That's Dan Durkee of Lake George. He works for Warren County's Public Health Department.
But you didn't worry about ticks, and now it's just something we have to be aware of, and we have to just kind of come to terms with. They're part of our environment now. They're not going anywhere. So what do we do to be safe when we're out there in their habitats?
According to the State Department of Health, the number of reported tick-borne disease cases more than doubled between 2004 and 2016. And in the North Country, recorded cases of Lyme disease went from just a handful in 1998 to over 1,500 in 2018. Durkee says as ticks have moved into the region, healthcare providers have had to learn how to recognize and diagnose tick-borne diseases.
We know there's a lot of other signs that can kind of manifest themselves, fever, fatigue, muscle aches in your large joints and things like that.
Durkee says those symptoms can mimic those of a viral illness, arthritis, or even seasonal allergies. And tick bites aren't always obvious.
You have to have a tick bite to be infected, but you don't have to remember it. There are certain stages in a tick's life cycle where you may not know you were bitten and still pick up Lyme. And so making sure people are looking at a history of where they've been and what they've done is just as important as going, oh, I remember a tick there. So, if you've been out on a long hike, you've been out spending time in the woods, were you in a tick habitat in the last 30 days that you could remember where maybe you could have been bitten and didn't realize it? Because that's important too. That's going to help your doctor to say, okay, maybe we should look for this.
2 other tick-borne diseases have been showing up in northern New York as of late: anaplasmosis and babesiosis.
We're starting to see, 10, 12, 15% of our tick population also being infected with anaplasmosis. And then a very small number, but a number nonetheless, that are infected with babesiosis.
Those are also treatable with drugs. Now, this might all sound pretty doom and gloom, but Durkee says the existence of ticks and tick-borne illnesses doesn't mean folks should give up on the outdoors. There are lots of simple ways to avoid ticks and tick bites: checking oneself frequently, wearing pants and long-sleeve shirts when in tick habitat, and spraying one's clothes with permethrin. He says prevention and self-awareness are key.
Taking some time just to kind of, again, do that quick, hey, is there anything crawling on me right now? I've been out. And, it's important, too, to know that the sooner you get the tick off, the less risk there is for you to have any disease spread.
Durkee says it's important to remember, too, that ticks have a particular habitat: tall grasses and shrubs, where they sit waiting to catch hold of an animal or human being passing by. So a well-maintained lawn is not tick habitat. Walking in the middle of a well-trod trail, that's not tick habitat.
And I think the other thing we have to remember, too, is not every tick's infected with something. Being bitten doesn't mean you're infected, right? Being bitten means there's potential and that you got to be smart and diligent looking for signs and symptoms.
Catching tick-borne diseases early makes a big difference in treatment and recovery. So don't be reluctant to see your doctor, says Durkee, even if you don't have that obvious red bullseye. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. If you're listening to the show on your phone as a podcast, it's cool, right? It's free. You listen when and where you want, and it's on your device automatically. So if you're in an Adirondack cell dead zone, no problem. You can still listen. Now, if you're listening on the radio right now, which is great, we love that, consider the podcast. It really gives you more options of when and where to listen to Story of the Day. Subscribe in your podcast app or go to ncpr.org/podcast for instructions. Music today by Lost in Beijing of Keene and Danny Thomas of Canton. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.